Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
And welcome back into the Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm, of course, your host, Matthew Zator. And once again, joined in by my co-hosts and fellow prospects experts, Peter Baracchini and Devin Little. How you boys doing?
Oh, it's good to be here with you guys.
It's good.
Absolutely.
And as you can see, we have a great guest on the show. Will, he's the founder of the website Scouching. He also writes for McKeens.com. Welcome, Will. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, lots of stuff to talk about with prospects with you. And you do a whole bunch of draft coverage, prospect coverage. So, always follow your stuff, and we usually use a lot of your stuff in our prospect profiles too. So thanks for coming on for sure. So before we get started, this week's show is being brought to you by the Hockey Writers Sports Betting Guide, brand new source for your daily sports betting odds, lines, props, and futures, as well as some daily fantasy strategies and analysis. Make sure you're following THW Bets on Twitter, the latest on everything sports betting. Also, if you decide to bet, please do so responsibly. And if you or anyone you know has a problem with gambling, please check out the resources in the description below. So now that's out of the way, of course, we're going to be talking about prospects, the draft, and a whole bunch of other stuff here. But to start, we're going to start with the U18's, which are still going on. It's ending tomorrow. One that just wrapped up, the U.S. is in the gold medal game, and after beating Czechia 6-1. So again, another dominant effort from the Americans. So they're into the gold medal game. One that's going on, going to start soon here. It's started now. Is Sweden and Finland. So we'll see how that goes. And Finland always seems to I don't know about surprise. They seem to always get there somehow, some way. Doesn't matter who's on the team, but they've got a pretty strong team and some good performances. So we'll talk a bit about that first. Starting with you, Will. Let's talk about prospects that have raised their stock in this tournament. There's a few standouts. Who's caught your eye so far?
Yeah, so I think the name on everyone's mind recently has been Jiri Kulik. He's got 9 goals or something now to this point in the tournament, which is remarkable. I've been a fan of Kulik all year. I've been watching him play in the Czech major or top division for the whole season. Had a really, really hot start to the year. Scored a bunch of goals in a bunch of different ways, but a lot of it this year has just been grab it and crank it from the face-off circle, on the power play and all that fun stuff. So he's probably the number one guy that I think has, in the eyes of a lot of people, maybe raised his stock. But he's been pretty high on my list all year. I'm just pleased to see it happen. He's been a guy who I hoped people would sort of see as a better player than what they were seeing going into it. I think Noah Östlund has had a great tournament for Sweden.
Yep.
One of the more higher octane guys, and I think a lot of scouts, including myself, to be honest, has been really looking for an elevation in his game when he's off of his out of his comfort zone, which is sort of with that junior team in Sweden. I watched him a bit in the Swedish Hockey League this year. Obviously, I don't think he's quite ready for that level of play yet to drive results, but he played okay. And then in this tournament, it's like, okay, well, this could be the difference between what maybe makes him a potential first round pick or maybe like a second, third round swing, and you'll see what happens. But he's played well. That entire unit has played well for Sweden. Outside of that, I think Isaac Bourne is a guy on Sweden who I never had even watched play before, and he has stuck out in a relatively limited role for them. And I think he's a guy who I want to take a closer look at between now and the draft. And I know I'm not the only one who sees that out of him. I went back and watched some tape of him. He plays for Frölunda's junior team, and I didn't really see much out of him, like maybe a checking third line guy, but he's played pretty well for the Swedes in this tournament. So there's a few guys that have kind of jumped off the page a little. Obviously the US team is just a wagon. I've been watching them all year, like a lot of people have. And so, you could pick any laundry list of guys on that team that have been really impressive, but definitely those guys, Kulik, Osland, Isaac Bourne off the board. There's been lots of interesting stuff going on in this tournament for me.
Yeah, the U18s always seem to bring out the best in some of these prospects, and we always see that. So going to you, Peter, who have you seen? You've been big on the U18s here. Who have you seen that's kind of jumped out, that's raised their stock so far?
Yeah, big on the especially Team USA that I pegged to have win the bronze medal last week. So scratch that opinion out of the way. It means nothing. But yeah, like Will said, that whole USA U18 team is just absolutely dominant. I think Isaac Howard and Rucker McGorty stand out the most. Players that are like, possibly on that fringe 15-20 spot, but I think can battle to be in that top 15. Howard just dominated the play from the onset. Question is about his defensive capabilities and play away from the puck, but it showed that he was able to be a dominant force and be a factor when he didn't have the puck and try and open things up for his teammates. McGorty, with his power forward like size, is just absolutely phenomenal what he was able to do. But for me, I think the most important player for me that improved the stock, I think, was going to be Julian Lutz from Germany. Out all season, dealing with multiple injuries. He came back in February, didn't quite have some of the production that he would like to have in the 14 games, but then he came over, dominated against Team Canada, finished the tournament off of 4 points in 4 games, 2 goals, 2 assists. I think if there was anybody that needed to have a strong tournament to try and get back on the scouts' radars, it was going to be him, because he has a speed, he has a powerful shot, has that power forward like mentality, kind of similar to McGrady, although not high end, but the skill set and the potential is there for him. So I was really excited to see him play, and he stood out for me, and I think he improved his stock.
Yeah, Lutz was someone I was hoping he would in this tournament. So it's great that he's stood out. Devin, we'll go to you. Who's stood out in the tournament for you, and that's raised their stock going into the draft here?
Well, I'll start with a player that on last week's show I said I wanted to see stand out and kind of announce himself, and that's Jonathan Lekkerimäki. He's been a absolute offensive force for Team Sweden in this tournament. 10 points in 4 games or something like that. And it's not just his shot, which he's kind of known for. He's playmaking. He's making stuff happen. Like I said, he's an offensive force. He's doing it all. I think that I can attest to the fact that a lot of the Red Wings groups that I'm in on Facebook, I'm seeing Lekkerimäki's name start to pop up more and more. And I think that's a testament to what he's doing in this tournament. And then the other guy I want to show some love to is 2023 prospect, and that would be Adam Fantilli. I think he's showing that, we already knew this, but I think he's showing that the 2023 draft is not just the Connor Bedard show. Fantilli's making stuff happen. He's showing off his speed, showing off his playmaking ability. Disappointing result in this tournament for Canada, but I think that on an individual basis for some of these players, Fantilli specifically in this sense, I think you're seeing a lot of promising things, and I think that going into the scouting season, so to speak, for the 2023 draft, I think a lot more people, because of this tournament, are going to know Fantilli's name. So good on him for, like I said, showing that it's not just the Connor Bedard show on Team Canada.
Well, Fantilli's such a big, I don't know. I think he's going to be in the top 3 probably in that 2023 draft. Yeah. So, of the plethora of talent that's there. So it's going to be pretty crazy. Going on to the other side of it, when there's guys that have raised their stock, there may be ones that have disappointed, maybe not say lowered it, but, people that you've kind of thought were going to be good in this tournament and haven't been. Will, was there anyone that kind of stood out for you in that case, that you were disappointed that they weren't standing out?
I think I'll take the opportunity to sort of twist the question a little and sort of say, because I look at tournaments like this and say, what are my expectations of a player going in? And the ones that I kind of look for are the guys that I'm interested in from watching them play with their clubs. And then it's like, okay, now they get a chance to play with a completely different group of people, a higher level. These are multiple countries taking their best young players. So it's completely different comfort zone for them. And I think there was a few guys on the Canadian team that I had been watching over the course of the year. And I'm like, all right, these guys are kind of interesting, and it might be interesting to see them play internationally. So like Michael Mastrodomenico is one of those guys who I was paying attention to. And I didn't see much out of him where I'm going, okay, like there were some things that I saw out of him at the USHL level where I'm going, okay, maybe this will come out, maybe shooting pucks on the power play, whatever. But Canada couldn't seem to hold on to a power play and instead just put themselves short a man all the time and didn't really get the chance to do that. And he had trouble breaking pucks out. And so it was kind of a bit of a disappointing situation with a few guys like that. But I also get pretty hesitant about being like, oh, well, these guys didn't show up because it's only like they played 5 games. And so much can be sort of contextual. And there hasn't really been anyone where I've watched them and gone like, what am I watching here? I mean, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more out of a guy like Philip Beested, big skilled center, and he's a guy where I've seen flashes all year, same thing for a guy like Fabian Wagner on Sweden. Like that's a good team, but those are guys where I've seen them in isolation do some really impressive stuff, and it just hasn't really come out the way that I expected. I was hoping that Nicholas Moldenauer would sort of be that, everybody was paying attention to Bedard and Fantilli, but the step behind him, I was hoping that this year that would be like a Nick Moldenauer, but he kind of struggled to generate offense consistently, struggled to transport pucks as much as I thought he could. But I think that the weaknesses that I saw in his game going into the tournament kind of got exposed a little with, his lack of quickness, lack of real high-end skill, but he's a really smart player. So I can't fault him too much for that. And I still think that, down the road, he's still going to be just fine with some training and development. But I always get a little hesitant around like who's been disappointing as opposed to like who did I have expectations for in terms of being out of their comfort zone, and then what did I get out of them, and did I get kind of what I want? But I guess relative to what I expected, a guy like Philip Beested, I was kind of hoping for like big power center game with skill, and I just kind of have seen like a okay version of that, and he kind of hasn't gotten the results that I've been specifically looking for.
Well, you're right. I mean, it is a small sample size, and it's so different from what they usually are playing against. And you take parts of it and seeing what they can do against top competition. But yeah, I do agree with what you're saying there. Peter, what do you think? I mean, anyone that kind of falls in that category for you that you were kind of expecting more out of them in this tournament?
Yeah, David Goya from Team Canada. Obviously all the headlines and talk were going to be around Bedard and Fantilli, the 2023 picks and everything like that. But going in, he was the one that I wanted to keep an eye on because he is a top prospect for 2022. Has a outstanding repertoire from the OHL where he was the top rookie in terms of I believe goals and points, second in assists. So he's a highly creative player. I wanted to see a little bit more of that creativity on the international scale. Again, one tournament is not going to damper his position, or it shouldn't, because of one tournament, because we know what he's capable of. But, he did have some lapses, poor turnovers, bad decisions with the puck. But then again, still young, still growing, still learning. It's expected of that. But I just want to see a little bit more consistency in his game, because I thought that he would have been a very solid addition to provide a little bit more offense to a Team Canada offense that on paper looked really good. And we just didn't quite see that.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Canada didn't impress as much as, we all predicted them to be in the gold medal game. So in fact, they didn't make it there was something. So yeah, stuff happens. Devin, finishing with you, is there anyone that kind of stood out as being, expectations going in didn't get met for you?
Yeah, and I'm a little hesitant to say too much on this because things can change, and also there's weighing expectations versus results. But we talked before on the show about how this class isn't exactly known for its wealth of goaltenders. And I think that one of the goaltenders who's pegged as maybe the top goaltender in the class is Finnish goaltender Topias Leinonen. And mind you, Finland's won 2 games with him in net, so he's doing enough to help his team win. But I guess I just wanted to see more out of him in the sense of showing that he is, he is a good goaltending prospect, and he's potentially, the top one in this class. I don't think he's done enough to move the needle, basically, is what I'm saying here. I think that, you know, like you said, they're playing Sweden here soon, so things can change. You know, he could be lights out. I'll change my answer real quick. But as it is right now, I guess what it comes down to, like I said, is I just wanted to see more. I'm not necessarily disappointed, but I just kind of want to see some separation as to who is the best goaltender in this class, and I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with the goaltenders where they go. Reed Dick was really good for Canada, even in, you know, he kept them in a few of these games that he played in. So he probably put more himself on the map. I'm not saying he's going to be a high end pick, but I think he moved up a bit for me. So that's for sure. Just to finish up this discussion, we go to a Twitter question from Majo. This is at MajluSK. He's asking, this for Will, how would Slovakia do at the U18s if they were there? And he's asking, why would they take home a silver medal? So what do you think of that one?
Well, I mean, I watched their Division 1A tournament and it was just hilarious. Like they just kind of, I can't remember how many goals they scored, but it wasn't particularly close. And they didn't even play guys like Simon Nemec and Adam Shakora in any, I don't think Philip Machar played any games. Like they didn't even play their best players. Like Alex Siernik was their all-star. I think he had 12 points in 5 games. Like it was just a joke. So, I mean, I absolutely think that the Slovakians would have finished ahead of at least Switzerland, Latvia, and Germany. You know, you get some goaltending. You know, that team could have skated with Canada, right? Like the problem with Canada is if Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli weren't on the ice, they just could not really drive play that well.
Yeah.
And so if Fantilli and Bedard weren't on the ice, then I think you could put, like even Slovakia, if you look beyond guys like Slavkovsky, if he could be there, you look beyond the big heavy hitters, they still have, you know, I would say 3 strong forward lines of guys that can compete and play, that have been playing pro hockey all year. And I think that they would have pushed Canada around, I think. The Czech Republic team, they've been playing well. Obviously they're getting a lot of firepower from a couple of guys that we've spoken about already. But I think that they would at least compete for a medal, you know, like a medal round. You know, I don't know if they would, like, I really like the Swedish team. The US team, I think we're a shoe-in for this gold medal game. They usually are for this tournament. And, you know, do I think Slovakia could have been in the gold medal game? I think it would have taken it would have been a really good game in the semifinals, I think, no matter who they played. But at least I think they compete for a medal. Like a bronze medal doesn't seem completely out of the realm of possibility. But I certainly think that they could have at least finished top 4 in this tournament relative to what places like the Czechs and Canadians brought.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to see how they would do in this the U18s here, and because they were really good in their Division 1 for sure. Peter, Devin, you have anything to add to that, or are we moving on here?
Yeah,
good stuff.
It was just a cakewalk for them. I mean, just simple as that.
That's right. Let's move into the 2022 draft. I mean, of course, we've talked about a few of the prospects already, but wanted to get Will's thoughts on a few of these things. First of all, is Shane Wright the undisputed first overall pick still, in your opinion, or has Logan Cooley closed the gap after his performance at U18s here?
Well, I mean, I felt for a long time this season that I don't think Shane Wright has the top slot locked up. I think it's pretty rare, if you look back, at least over the last 10, 15 years, that the first overall pick is like a lock for being the best player to come out of the draft. Like if you look back, you'd be surprised how often it's kind of arguable. Yeah. And I feel like we're going to look back on this draft and feel the same way. Like, I don't think this is like a Connor McDavid, you know, Austin Matthews-esque draft where it's like, no, you just draft this guy and you have a laugh. I think there's work to do with Shane Wright. He's not perfect. You know, he has flaws. You know, he's probably, I would say he's the smartest player in the draft in terms of just going out and offensively playing the game and driving play and just doing things his way. But that also comes at issues elsewhere for me. You know, Logan Cooley's been in that top group for me all year pretty much. It didn't take very long for me to see a bit more of a dynamic, creative, pace-pushing offensive guy out of Cooley than Shane Wright, whereas Shane Wright is more of an adaptive, on-the-fly kind of puck transporter and, finisher rather than, all over the ice, sort of quarterbacking the entire play, pushing defenders onto their heels and everything. But I mean, I think that there's a really strong group at the top here. I mean, I still am a huge fan of Brad Lambert. Like, it's almost a meme at this point. Like, I think he just gets such a bad rap for stuff that I don't think is entirely his fault. Again, a flawed player for sure, but every single time he gets away from the Liga this year, he's been extremely talented and borderline dominant when he plays for the Finnish under 20 team. So I still see a really, really talented player there that needs time and patience, but I don't know. I've seen Finnish players it's like Atu Ratu last year, where I was watching him play, and I was hearing a lot of what people were saying about him, and I'm going, I don't think I buy everything about what people are saying. I had people telling me he was like a mid-round pick last year, and he turned out to be a second-round pick, but it's just he gets a different scenario, and it kind of fits what he plays like a little bit better. So I still have Brad Lambert in that top group. I think he's could be one of the best players looking back at the end of the day. David Jiricek is just outside that group, I would say. Same thing with Yuri Slafkovsky. Like, those guys, I think, will fit different roles in the NHL, but I think in terms of guys you can round out your lineup with, maybe not quarterbacks of like your future, they'll be great sort of auxiliary, top two line guys that can really, really help your team in an NHL projectable way. So they're kind of like a bit below the rest of the group, but if I don't have a pick in the top three, those are the guys that I'm probably looking at first. But they're all it's a really, really interesting group of players.
Yeah, and the thing is we've said Shane Wright. I mean, he's not a generational player. I mean, that word's getting thrown out way too often. But he's going to be a solid player. But he's not. Yeah, like I say, he's not the guy that's like a Connor McDavid. You pick him, that's it. I mean, you're not going to talk about anyone else. But there's a lot of interesting players at this top of this draft. So we'll see where it all goes. Ultimately, if whoever gets the first overall pick, if they do pick right or go off and grab someone else. So we will see. Let's go to a Twitter question. This is from Majlu SK again here. He had two questions. This one's about Nemec. His question is, what is it about Nemec that you don't like? What's
okay. So, I mean, first of all, I've got Nemec at 8 on my list. Like, my last list, I think I had him at 11. So he's moved up a little bit. I think I watched another game of his, did some more video work. McKean's, we just put out a piece on him where my entire team took a look at him and put some stuff together. And that made me a little more optimistic, just looking back at what I've seen of him already and sort of reflecting on it. But the thing with Simon Nemec is he's still in a league where it's kind of unproven of how well players from that league translate to the NHL. Like, I watched the Slovakian league, and I watched Bryant Clark there all year last year. And, I think that it just isn't, it's not like most other pro leagues in Europe. It's not a bad pro league in Europe, but it's not phenomenal. And that's not really the reason I don't really have as much time for Nemec as others. I look at him and I see a guy who, his defensive game is really passive. Like, he kind of lets the game come to him a lot. Like, I've seen plays where he is basically standing still in the defensive zone, waiting for someone to sort of come down the wing at him, and doesn't really have the momentum or anticipation to sort of get in there and get involved. And maybe he could learn that for sure. His best asset to me is carrying pucks. Like, that's kind of what his meat and potatoes is going to be, is just puck on his stick, carrying it up the ice and transporting it himself. But when I watch him do that, he's a really fluid skater, generates speed, going straight lines real well. But the skill level to sort of maneuver around the neutral zone projectably against better defensemen, I think, is an issue right now. Like, and again, we're talking about through the lens of like top NHL draft pick, right? Like, I look at Logan Cooley right now at the U18s, and I'm going, that's a guy I could see playing top 6 center easily, quarterback, playmaker, finisher, everything. With Simon Nemec, it's like he doesn't really have the same traits where you're like, this guy's a lightning rod. The skill level's not quite there. The agility and mobility is kind of not quite there relative to other guys. And I think that, again, it's really, really close. Like, after the top 5 guys that we kind of talked about earlier, it's so close. And like, if you wanted to take him over a guy like Matthew Savoy, for example, I have issues with Matthew Savoy, just like I have issues with Nemec. I think Savoy has more talent that you can sort of work with and build on. Like, and not to say that there isn't the same with Nemec, but it's like just a little bit of a difference. And so it just kind of knocks him down a peg. You know, I've got a guy ahead of Simon Nemec that you might be able to get in the second round. So that also means like, well, you know, would I pick him over Simon Nemec? Probably not, but we would chat about it. But Nemec the big thing is like, I see him as maybe a second pair quarterback defenseman that can transport pucks up the ice. But the issues are when he doesn't have the puck, and how good is he actually at transporting pucks once he gets beyond the Slovakian Pro League? Like, it's good. And again, like, it's nitpicky because you kind of have to be. But, you know, I still look at David Jiricek, for example, and I see a player who certainly could play in the NHL and eat minutes and do offensive things really well. Nemec, I just think is a shade below that in terms of the likelihood of sort of playing his brand and getting away with it as much. But development can also factor in hugely, and so I might look silly in a few years. But I think back half of the top 10 is more than reasonable for him.
And I do think with Nemec at times too, he can be a bit of a risk taker in terms of pinching up into the play at times, especially some of the games that I've seen. He does like to, you know, be engaged offensively, but at the same time, it does quite turn around to, you know, bite him a bit. But at the same time, he does a good job to kind of recover. So I think he has that going for him. But again, I agree with what you said, Will, because there are some flaws in this game that still needs to be worked around. But yeah, I think even so, the fact that he's a bit of a risk taker could also play into that factor as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also there's a lot of this online talk about him because, like, with all due respect to Slovakia, it's been a really long time since we've had a lot of really good players come out of Slovakia at the high end of the draft. And so I get it, because I get the feeling that based on the person's username, he is from Slovakia or something. And I've had a lot of people from Slovakia ask me, like, why don't you like Nemec as much? Why don't you like this? And it's like, well, he's the best player to come out of your country in a long time. But there's a lot of really good players out there from other countries and other places and it's so close that it just, like, I don't know, I find little things to just knock them down a little bit, you know, and I like Slavkovsky just a little bit more. And it's just a matter of like it's the big boy club, right? Like, it's the top end of the NHL draft. There's a lot of competition, and you have to be very, very, very surgical with your analysis to make sure that you know what you're looking at and can make the best decision.
Agreed. And the thing is about defensemen, they traditionally take longer to develop as well. So, I mean, you have to be high end to be jumping right into the NHL and be really good. So Nemec is going to have some development to do as well. So, but he's still going to be probably a top 4 defenseman in his prime. So
yeah, absolutely. I could see that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, it may take more development as well. So moving on to another guy that's kind of slid down the rankings in a lot of places. This is a question from Blaine Potvin. He's one of our writers here. He's a Montreal Canadiens writer. His question is, why is there such a wide margin of rankings on Conor Geekie? And how far could he slide if he does slide in this draft? What do you think?
I don't think Geekie's sliding. I really don't. An NHL team, maybe not all of them, but I know for a fact that there will be NHL teams that will be like, this guy could be a monster, you know. And I don't have any worries that Geekie's going to slide down the draft board, because he's got so many tools that I think NHL teams look for, right? Like, he's a center, he's got size. You know, he's pretty smart in terms of positional awareness, and, you know, he makes plays. Like, he drives good data in the games that I've tracked. Like, it's not like this guy doesn't play very well. But when I look at Conor Geekie, like, he's in the back half of my first round. Like, if you can get Conor Geekie after 20, I think that's a great pickup. Like, I think he peaks as maybe a third line NHL center, a good one at that, like a perfectly good play driving third line center. But when I look at Conor Geekie, I see a long road ahead of him for real impact NHL upside. And again, it's about where you're picking him and what you're giving up when you pick him, right? Like, who's on the board and what are you hoping for with Geekie? Because when I see Geekie, I see a guy who is big and can protect the puck pretty well, but can't keep pucks away from higher end defenses very well. Like, his skill level isn't particularly good, at least in transition, like at speed. his close quarters skill, and I think he has what I like to call practical skill, where if pucks are bouncing around in these chaotic hockey situations where it's just like total madness, there's sticks flying everywhere, like he'll find a way to get his stick on the puck, move it into space, find an option, and do something with it. Like, and that's, I think, something that NHL teams look for, is someone who can, in those situations, whether it's grinding along the boards or a dumped in puck that's bouncing along the ice, like just settle the puck, make a play with it, and do something with it. And he does that really well. And he does that in the offensive zone, defensive zone, whatever. So he just has that natural feel for the puck that kind of, I think, projects really well. But it's just a matter of, what are you drafting him to be, right? Like, could he be a Jordan Staal type guy where he's not the most flashy and incredible offensive guy and puts up 50, 60 points a year and drives really good data for you? Sure, I could see that potentially. And in that case, you could draft him a little bit higher and maybe take a bit of a chance, at least in my view. But the guys ahead of him for me are more like higher octane offensive guys, guys like, I've got like a Noah Östlund ahead of him right now, because I think that that's a guy who in the NHL put the puck on his stick. The skill, the intelligence, and the actual intensity of his game is just higher than Conor Geekie right now. He might be plastered to the boards by Conor Geekie a few times in the NHL, but for every time he gets plastered to the boards in open ice, I feel like he can get around and blow right by him in the NHL. So it's a cost benefit, really. But again, I don't think Conor Geekie's going to slip. I feel like a team is going to look at him and see a guy who could be a top 15, maybe even top 10, and just go, let's just make him, quicker, more skilled, stronger, and maybe you get something really impressive there, which I have time for. But there's just other guys that I think right now give you more. And I don't like what ifs in my philosophy. Like, I don't like the idea of, if this happens and this and this and this, then the guy's a monster. And it's like, okay, cool, but everyone else is also going to be improving. Like, a bunch of other guys are going to be developing as well. And I feel like he just has a little bit more of a ways to go to be that top 6 power offensive guy. But not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that it might be a little bit of a longer road.
Yeah, and well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Conor Geekie. I know, Devin, you said, we're disappointed a bit when the top prospects game there. And so, I mean, but yeah, he's got some work to do, but he's got the talent, I think, to be, like you said, a lot of that, still a top 6 guy. And, we'll see. He's got a lot of talent, and he'll probably be drafted in that top 15 range.
Yeah.
Most likely someone will take a chance, or not take a chance, but take him there. Just to finish off the discussion here, just giving you an opportunity, Will, to, shout out some prospects that you kind of want to talk about in the first round. I mean, we've talked about a few of them already, but anyone else you kind of want to talk about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some really interesting ones for this year's draft. I think it's a draft where there's a lot of guys with high potential, but a lot of work to do before you get there. So I think there's going to be a lot of noise in this year's draft. Like, I am a huge fan of, I mean, there's a couple of Russians I have in the first round, and obviously everything going on in Russia is a totally different conversation, and it's totally uncertain, and no one knows what's really happening. So my philosophy is like, let's just pretend everything's fine and just keep evaluating the players as if they're just hockey players. So I've got Russians in my first round, like Vladimir Grudinin and Gleb Trikazov. I think those guys are rock stars and have tons and tons of potential that hasn't really been exacerbated yet. I think Gleb Trikazov's youth is a huge benefit for him relative to the rest of the draft class, especially considering how well he's performed at the MHL, in the MHL this year, and in the BHL games that I saw, he played well there. Grudinin was in the KHL for a long stretch this year, VHL for a long stretch, and he did not look out of place there playing defense at 5'10" or 5'11", and I think he has a ton of upside as well. So if those, if NHL teams are sort of more adverse of drafting Russians this year, I understand why. Yeah. But if you can get those guys outside of the first or even second round, then you may as well just draft them and hold on to their rights and get in contact with their agent. I think they have the same agent, and it's Dan Milstein, who is a guy who's brought plenty of Russians over the years. Yeah. So it's like, if you can get those guys in the third round-ish and just say, hey, Dan, what would it take to get these guys to North America? Like, let's talk. Then maybe you look really, really smart very, very quickly. But Sam Renzel's another one that I think belongs in the first round, a guy who was brought to my attention pretty late, but since he's been playing with Waterloo. I've watched a few games that he's played, and just a ton of potential, like big, rangy offensive defenseman, really skilled, really aggressive with the puck in the offensive zone. Just, needs to work on his defense for sure. Like, he's big, but doesn't really know how to use it a ton. But he's not poor defensively. It's just sort of the pace of play in the USHL is not Minnesota high school, and he doesn't play with the puck as much as he does down there. But there's a lot to like about his game. So those are some names I think that I don't think get a ton of attention that high in the draft that I am championing. A lot of people also seem to have forgotten about Jack Hughes with Northeastern, who I've liked as well for a guy who is a draft eligible first time playing in the NCAA. Again, unrefined and needs some work, but he has that sort of Conor Geekie sort of small area skill that kind of gets pucks up the ice really well and moves pucks around really well. So it's just a matter of staying in college and developing. So I think there's a few for sure that you could pay a little more attention to that I have pretty high.
Yeah, those are some great names. Just the last question of this segment here. I want to know, I just came up with this question. It's not on the outline, but Denton Mateychuk or Kevin Korchinski, who would you draft over?
I'm going with Kevin Korchinski. I look at Denton Mateychuk and I see a guy who, like, one thing I ask people who are huge fans of him is, like, name a player in the NHL who plays like Denton Mateychuk, like his style. I can't name a single one. Like, he is a guy who is thinking offense all of the time, like jumping into every single offensive zone opportunity he gets. Like, it might work, like I could see a team that wants basically 5 forwards on the ice and their forwards are just defensively responsible, taking him and just saying, let's just see what happens. But I look at him and I see a guy who is a little undersized, not the most mobile player. He's got a great shot. You can't fault him for that. He's pretty young for the draft as well. He has the mind of a forward in the offensive zone, but his defensive game, like his mobility, not skating forwards, is a big question mark for me. He gets beaten wide a lot when he's challenged. He's pretty reliant on just being in the right place in the right time defensively rather than actually getting involved. But his passing game, I think, is effective but relatively simple. So it's a lot of just, like, I don't know, like if we're talking Denton Mateychuk in the late 20s, something like that, like you're a contending team, you want to just take a chance on that high flying offensive kid, then go nuts. But I look at a guy like Kevin Korchinski, and the guy I see in Kevin Korchinski is like a Jake Gardner, where you have tons of skill and puck carrying ability that, he can push and pull the pace of his game really, really well. Really good skill to deceive and move pucks around defenders and maneuver through the neutral zone. Doesn't need to jump up into the offensive zone to make plays like Mateychuk does. He just sort of gets the puck, takes a look, skill move, and sends a puck into the slot. Like, he does that more often than most defensemen I've tracked. Whereas at 5-on-5, Mateychuk's ability to drive actual offense in the offensive zone is significantly more limited. Like, he's a player who, at least in the games I've seen against good WHL competition, kind of struggles to bring that offensive, output. But Korchinski just brings it all over the ice. His defense, I think, is an issue. Like, he's a guy who is also pretty passive defensively. He's got reach and size, but doesn't really use it. Loses physical battles a little too much. But when the puck's on his stick, I think he's one of the more gifted defensemen in the draft. So I look at him and I see him similarly aged to Mateychuk. I see a little bit of a more well-refined, dynamic offensive puck mover's brain than Mateychuk. But when it comes to just cowboy yeehaw hockey, like shoot the puck at the net and go nuts, then yeah, Mateychuk's the guy.
Yeah, they're both talented defensemen, but like Peter's been Korchinski all the way. So
yeah,
I've been more on the
Mateychuk all the way
train, but I do agree with that. He has a lot of offense. He has to develop that defensive game, but if he can do that, then he's a pretty good defenseman too. So let's move on from the draft to NHL's top prospects. Just quickly touch on a few guys that have just made their NHL debuts that started playing in the NHL a bit here. Again, small sample sizes, but let's start with the first overall pick from last year, Owen Power. who just debuted with the Buffalo Sabres, has been playing a few games already. We'll go around the table here quickly. We'll start with you, Peter. How did you thought about Owen Power's game in the NHL so far? I mean, he's looked pretty good in my opinion. It looks like he's kind of stepped in, but again, this is on a team that's not making the playoffs. He's playing a lot. What do you think?
Well, if I recall, he didn't get his first goal against the Leafs, so that's a good thing. I think he did get an assist though, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna have to go back and look at the stat sheet on that. But you know what? For the limited sample size that we've seen Owen Power play, and I think the transition's been very seamless. It's been very effective, and it's working out in Buffalo's favor right now. Especially on that left side where you got Power and Rasmus Dahlin as your 1-2 to anchor that side. Maybe I don't know what their game plan is going to be for the draft, but if you can try and solidify a right-hand defenseman with the picks that they have, why not? Whether it's early or late in the draft, depending on where they are. But I really love his consistency. I really love his poise, his confidence on the back end. We talked about how he was able to make that transition from college to the World Hockey Championship to being a dominant force at the World Junior. So he's played at all levels right now. So I think he's got that going for him. He has the experience. He's got a lot of senior play under his belt. And I think right now he's transitioning well in terms of, his positioning where the Buffalo Sabres are, because they seem to have, take a step above in their rebuild, trying to be more competitive next year. And Owen Power is going to do just that with his defensive play, his physicality, his mobility. It's just going to be improving from here on out.
Yeah, agreed on that. Devin, what do you think about Owen Power's game? I don't know if they've played the Red Wings with Power in the lineup yet, but I mean, whatever have you seen of him? What do you think?
Well, I think that you should doubt the Buffalo Sabres at your own risk, because that team's going to be real good real soon. I think that with the combination of Dahlin having the breakout season we've all been kind of waiting for, and then now adding Power to the lineup, I think you're seeing a very dynamic Buffalo Sabres blue line. And I think that Power size, his skill, his combination of both feeds into that. I think for my money, I think Powers looks good. I don't think he's looked like a first overall pick who's like going to transform the team, but I don't think that's what the expectation should have been. I think that you just wanted to see him come in, make a positive impact on the team. And, he's just getting his feet wet in the NHL. This is more of just like a dip your toe in, see what it's like, and then be ready for next year. And I think with that as the objective, I think he's really succeeded. And I think, like I said, the Sabres are all the better for it.
For sure. Will, I'll finish with you. You say you track these prospects right after the draft up until a few years here. What do you think about Owen Power's NHL game so far?
Yeah.
Even though it's a small sample size.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been good. It's one thing that's really, really reassuring, because I was not the biggest Owen Power fan last year, but mostly that was because I didn't trust an NHL team to use him the way that I thought he was going to be at his best. Like, he was a guy who is at 6'6". It would be very enticing to see him go, well, what if we made him like a monster? Like, what if we just made him a guy who gobbled everybody up and spat them out? And it's like, well, that's not his game. Like, whenever he tried to do that in the NCAA, he did not do very well. Keeping things simple defensively was kind of when he kept things at his best, and his best asset was offense. Like, get the puck, skate with it, make a play. Like, that was what he did extremely well. And he's leaned into that even more this year. Like, you saw it at the World Juniors, just like being more confident, more assertive, pushing up with the puck, taking on more responsibility for himself. And you do see flashes of that in the NHL. Like, we'll see how much that comes out, but he's been good. Like, I think Devin had it right. Like, you kind of have the expectation of, it's hard not to have the expectation of, oh my God, the first overall pick is going to change my team forever. Yeah. But I don't think that was the expectation with him when he was drafted. But he is going to be a perfectly reasonable, top member of that team for a long time, chipping in and doing what he does best, which is offense. So I think on that side of the puck, he's been good. The analytics underlying him have been good as well. We'll see what happens when he's tested a little more over a longer sample next year. But I've liked him. I had him ranked a little lower than most people, a lot lower than most people last year, but that's only because I felt like last year's top 10 was really, really close, like really close. And he's come in and looked pretty good. So it's positive, and I think I commend the Buffalo Sabres for, I don't know how much they had to do with it, but they've seemed to have brought him along, and Michigan seems to have brought him along, nurturing the strengths in his game rather than trying to make him something he's not. So thankful for that, because the stuff that wasn't so good was really not so good, but he's really leveraging the stuff that is really good now. So pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, he's been really good so far. And I mean, let's talk about another guy, second overall pick, Matty Beniers, playing for the Seattle Kraken, and he went on a point streak to start his career there for a bit. We'll start with you, Devin, on this one. What do you think about Matty Beniers' game? I mean, he's come in pretty good. Again, a bad team, not making the playoffs. He's playing quite a few minutes right off the bat. What do you think?
Well, 8 points in 9 games is not bad. I dare you to tell me it is. But I think for a Seattle Kraken team that, let's face it, has not had a ton to cheer for outside of the first season in existence, I think Beniers has come in and shown that he was a really good pick at second overall. I think that and he's playing a lot too. Like it's not like he's kind of being sheltered. I think he's playing like first line minutes since he's come in, and he's showing well. I think that I'm pretty sure I said this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about him, where he might step in and automatically be their top center. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. And that's kind of crazy because, this kid played in college earlier this year. And, I've been impressed. I think that I want to see him continue this into next season. I'm not going to read too much into this small sample, but I do think it's a really promising thing that he is showing this well on a team that hasn't exactly been lighting up the score sheet this season. And it's exciting for Kraken fans to have their first ever draft pick come in and seemingly already make a difference for them.
Yeah, we were expecting kind of that a bit. Peter, Will, you have anything to add about Beniers in this small sample size? He's done pretty well.
I could talk about Matty Beniers all day. How much time do you guys have? I could talk about him all day. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, he was my number one guy last year. And I mean, I had a top group where he was at the top, but he wasn't the only one there. But I mean, you could tell watching him last year, he projects to the NHL, no problem. He's a guy who is exactly the type of center I'm looking for. Active all over the ice, working defensively to put in the work and drive defensive results, transitioning pucks up the ice well, creating in the offensive zone. He was among the leaders of shot assists for the game for the guys that I tracked last year, and it wasn't particularly close. So he's a really, really good player when it comes to just doing everything that you need to do for a center, right? Get the puck in the defensive zone, cause turnovers, transport it up the ice, and create in the offensive zone. And so, there were some flaws in his offensive game in terms of scoring, but that's so minor relative to all of the things that he does so well. And I've seen a couple of Kraken games with him, and again, NHL pace is not college pace, and I think that at 5-on-5 he still kind of has some adjustments to make, and another summer of getting stronger and quicker is not going to hurt him at all. No. But you can see sort of the skill and the brain all kind of working together with and without the puck. The work rate is absolutely there. I can see why Seattle is so comfortable playing him in so many minutes right away, because he doesn't really have these like holy crap moments where it's like, oh crap, I'm in the NHL and I can't do this anymore. It's like he's in the NHL, and the way he plays kind of naturally suits what coaches are kind of looking for, and you can kind of depend on him. Even if the results aren't great, it's like, just go out there and just keep learning, getting better, working hard, and doing the thing. And he is being rewarded for it. He hasn't scored a point in one game that he's played, which is insane to me.
Pretty good.
So yeah, he's hit the ground running. It's not perfect, but he's been really, really good in my viewings of him. So I'm thrilled, and it makes me feel good because he was the number one guy for me last year, and I loved him last year for sure.
There we go. Peter, you want to say anything on Beniers?
Nah, Devin and Will basically covered everything. I'm just going to reiterate and just say, if you have a potential top line two-way centerman with his skill set and his vision and his work ethic, chances are when he was going to come in, he was going to make an impact. I didn't expect, just under a point per game, but you would have been able to see the small details in how he plays, the smarts and the positioning awareness that he has. I thought that would have stood out, but the offensive game is starting to come around, and I think that's a major sticking point for him. I'm absolutely thrilled with the way that he's been able to transition to the NHL. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy too, because I wrote his profile last year and a lot of the stuff I said about him is true. So that's awesome. Always good. Let's start finishing up with, let's lump these three in together because they're all from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Kent Johnson, Nick Blankenburg, and Cole Sillinger. Sillinger, of course, played all season with them. Johnson and Blankenburg just started. Blankenburg, in my opinion, has looked the best out of Johnson coming in, which is surprising to me. I'll open this up to everyone. Want to jump in? We'll start with you, Will. What do you think about these three guys and how they've performed with the Blue Jackets so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, Kent Johnson was always going to be. I always felt that there was a bit of an adjustment period for him that was on the way. Like, he is a player who I think needs to learn the balance between what you can and can't get away with the puck on your stick. And I think he's sort of on the road in the right direction. I haven't seen much of Columbus with him, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I don't know. He was a little bit lower on my list last year, but not too far because of the skill level and just the pure upside of the pick. Like, in terms of playing offensively and creating, I think there's a lot to like there. And I feel like another summer with the team and training with the team and just starting fresh with the new season next season, I would expect him to take on a bigger role and be able to drive a little more offense than he has in this 9-game sample he's got so far. But yeah, I mean, adjusting to the NHL to me was always going to be a time thing for him, like just a little bit longer because of the issues that he showed. Cole Sillinger, he's been just rock solid all year. Started hot, kind of slowed down, but just the brain and the way that he sees and plays the game is really impressive. He's got skill and finishing ability, but he's also showed really good instincts at both ends to just play sort of rock solid down the middle minutes, not playing a ton, looks like about third line minutes or so. So kind of easing him in on a team without much expectations. And I feel like that's just going to continue for next year. But I mean, Nick Blankenburg, like you said, he's been, I think, the more impressive of them all, but he's also 4 years older than Kent Johnson and 5 years older than Sillinger. So, but I mean, I remember watching Nick Blankenburg last year paired with Owen Power, and I'm going, this guy's mopping up a lot of Owen Power's problems. Like he's covering for him a lot and making a lot of really smart plays and sort of covering for him really, really well. And I mean, he's come in and just showed why he's such an interesting player. Like he's a really interesting type of defenseman that is exactly kind of what I think needs to be leveraged a little more in the NHL, which is these undersized guys that maybe don't score a ton, but the results are still great. Like I remember watching him with Michigan the last 2 years and going, okay, this guy has a great set of feet under him. He's super mobile, super skilled, super transportable with the puck, really good defensive feet as well, just closes gaps really well, uses his stick really well, turns play around well, little skill moves to chip pucks around in defensive situations and make plays. It was all really, really impressive. And, there's offensive upside that I think maybe won't come out in the NHL, but it's there. So I've really liked him. I mean, I think in terms of how much development there might be in his game, I don't think there's going to be a ton, but I get the feeling he could be an NHL defenseman based on what I've seen with Columbus this year. And, maybe even if he's not like a number 3 defenseman for Columbus or something, he could be like a secondary power play guy, maybe your bottom pair, number 4 guy, if you need him to be, and getting that for free is great. And he's been a guy that I've had my eye on for a long time. And I'm thrilled that he's going straight to the NHL without having to take sort of contracts here and there to prove that he's not too small to play. So yeah, I just have a soft spot for him, and I'm thrilled that he's doing well.
Yeah, he's making me look good again. I shouted him out on the grind line before when he was still out there, and said the Detroit Red Wings should have signed him. And then I also said I didn't want them to sign him because I wanted the Canucks to try to get him. But I don't know if they were on the running at all. But he's looking good for Blue Jackets for sure. Peter or Devin, you have anything to add to that, or we good?
I'm good on my end. Again, Will basically covered everything. It's hard to find those kind of players where, undersized defensemen are going to get passed up quite a bit. But when you have the knowledge and the positioning abilities that Blankenburg has and the ability that he can play with at such a high pace, I mean, it's hard not to give him that opportunity and give him that shot. And he's just running away with it right now. Yeah. So I guess right now we're hopefully the mentality of, because he's a shorter player compared to, other defensemen that are like Owen Power size, maybe that stigma could just be thrown out the window because if you're able to play, doesn't really matter at this point.
Yeah, we've said that a lot on the undersized thing. I mean, it shouldn't be a thing anymore. Mm-hmm. There's so many guys that have just broken that out. So, So before we get to our prospects of the week, just a quick roundtable. This is looking towards the 2023. I mean, this is a prediction, but how many superstars will come out of that draft? I mean, it's kind of hard to say right now, maybe, but Will, how many do you think will come out of that draft?
2023?
Yeah.
I'm going to play it safe and say at least 2.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
I mean, 2, because I don't know. I've seen a bit of the 2023 class. I have hesitated because I can't tell you how many years I've been doing this and going, oh, next year looks really good. And then a bunch of guys that I'm looking forward to end up being meh, like just another first round pick. Right. So it's kind of like, like everybody would not shut up about Matthew Savoy 2 years ago. And now I think you can poke enough holes in his game where it's like, yeah, he's not the sort of lock top 3 guy. So I don't know. I look at 2023 and go, for sure, Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli right up at the top. Mateychuk, I like Mateychuk a ton. He's a great scoring forward. I have some concerns about him, but I also get the feeling that he's going to be a guy that Russia right now will move heaven and earth to keep in Russia. So I get the feeling that if things keep going the way they are, and it's going to get to the point where NHL teams are like, ugh. The Russian government will probably print money just to pay Mateychuk to stay in Russia so he has a comfortable lifestyle and doesn't want to leave. Like, I don't know. I maybe, and I still think that in terms of a hockey player, I think Adam Fantilli and Connor Bedard are still a step ahead. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of interesting talent, but in terms of superstars, I'll go 2 and be conservative.
Devin, you're going to go conservative with the 2, or are you going to add a bit?
I am going to be conservative. I'm only going to be slightly less conservative. I'm going to say 3.
Peter, how many you got?
Minimum 3, max 5. I think you don't know for sure, but you don't want to put too much pressure on Dalibor Dvorsky, who looks absolutely phenomenal at the young age that he's playing at in Sweden. I think you could also maybe throw Leo Carlson in there. Again, I was kind of impressed with what I saw at the U18's in the games that he played. But for sure you're gonna have Bedard, Fantilli, Michkov if he is able to come and play over. Then again, that contract for another 3 seasons after he's drafted is going to be a big red flag for teams because, you would want to have him come over and play right away. But he is going to be a really top tier player in my mind. And I'm going to say minimum 3, max 5. Just go a little slightly bit over.
There we go. That's great. I mean, it was just hypothetical. We'll go. Maybe it's going to be on the internet, so we'll go back.
We called it first.
That's right. So let's go prospects of the week. We usually do this on the show, and so shout out prospects that not necessarily had a great week, but just wanted to spotlight. Let's start with you, Peter. Who are you spotlighting, and who's your prospect of the week?
Well, Will talked about him before at the top of the show. Yuri Kulich. Just absolutely phenomenal what he was able to do at the U18's right now. 9 goals, 11 points. I was going to say 11 assists, but geez, that would be nice. 11 points in 5 games. That's really phenomenal. You could rave on and on about him. I mean, his shot was fantastic. His play away from the puck. He projects as a really strong 2-way scoring center. He's got the awareness. He's got the, intensity, the work ethic that he plays with is at a very high pace. And we saw that at this tournament. A player that kept rising up my rankings throughout the year. And now he's going to be in my top 30 for my next set of rankings and possibly in my finals. Obviously, he's going to be in there for my finals, but it was just great to see him play because he was one of the players that I wanted to keep my eye on, and he was just fantastic.
Yeah, well, he's helped me for my prospect profile too, so I've got quite a bit more content to add to that.
There you go.
Yeah. So, Devin, who's your prospect of the week?
Well, showing some love to my local Grand Rapids Griffins. Jonathan Berggren broke the franchise record for rookie scoring with 62 points in 69 games. And I know here I am talking about a Red Wing, very on brand, but there's something to this. He broke that record, and a lot of people make, a lot of noise about what Simon Edvinsson may or may not do for the Red Wings next year, but I don't think enough people are talking about what Berggren might do for the Red Wings next year.
Yeah.
I think he's going to make the team, and I think that he's showing, I guess, take a step back. This is a player that I think his game has changed a lot since his draft year. This is a player who people were concerned was a perimeter player. This is a player who people weren't sure could ever stay healthy. Now he's had 2 seasons where not only does he stay healthy, but he's going to the net. He's not just, hanging out on the perimeter. He's scoring goals just as much as he's setting them up. So I think he's got a lot of skill. And I think that the people who are overlooking him right now are not going to be doing so about halfway through next season, because he's going to be that kind of surprise guy that people might not have known was out there. But looking forward to see him wear the red and white next year.
Yeah, Berggren, we talked a lot about on the grind line. So if you want to know more about him, just go back and watch a few of those episodes, because a lot about him.
27 THW's mid-season rankings. He went up in that regard. So yeah, good pick.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. We'll finish with you before I give my prospect of the week. Who's your prospect of the week?
First off, love the Berggren love. Been a huge fan of him for years. Attaboy. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that I'll give it to Adam Fantilli. Like, I think he's a guy who had a bit of a coming out party. I think for a little while, people have asked me about him, and I've been like, he is right there. Like, he is one of the guys. Like, if he were eligible this year, for sure he'd be in a tier of his own, first overall for me this year. Like, I've seen him play with Chicago a little while. Yeah. And he's just been absolutely bonkers. And in ways that you go, I could see him playing this way in the NHL. Just like a dominant power center that just carries play no matter what, just all around the ice, very much in that Matty Beniers kind of vibe, but almost ratcheted up a bit. Yeah. So it's nice to see him get the recognition that I think he's been deserving of. I mean, Connor Bedard, of course, is outstanding and unbelievable and just bananas. But Adam Fantilli certainly showed that he could hang, that he could, stick with a guy like Bedard and not look out of place. And I think that just watching him play, it's like, yep, now people are kind of seeing why certain folks who watch the USHL and everything are so excited about a guy like him next year. Even if you don't pick first overall, he'll do just fine, I think.
Pretty good. Yeah. Oh, I agree for sure. I mean, Fantilli's been amazing since last year. He was amazing. So at such a young age. So for sure. Mine's going to be Logan Stankoven from, the WHL here. He's dominating. He dominated all year. He was third in scoring. He's first in the playoffs in points. Drafted way too low, in my opinion. Dallas Stars, like we've said, have gotten steals, in the couple of their guys, Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven. Going to be ridiculous in the NHL, it looks like. And Stankoven's he's undersized, but he doesn't play that way. He's probably one of the better. He's very dynamic. He's not afraid of going to the front of the net and on the boards and fighting for pucks, forecheck, all that stuff. So I've loved him since the draft, and he's been amazing this year. And we've talked about him so many times on this show already. So, I mean, again, go back and watch our different coverages of this guy, because I think he's going to be amazing in the NHL. And we all think so. So Logan Stankoven, my prospect of the week, and we'll see how he does in the playoffs here, if he wins anything championship wise. But he's been doing his best to get that done. So Stankoven for sure. Oh, that's another show. Thanks, Will, for coming on the show and talking prospects. It was great to have you on, and yeah, so it'd be great to have you on again after the draft to get your takes on some where they got drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Yeah, so thanks again for watching the show. There's gonna be a lot more draft coverage as we keep going here because the draft is getting closer by the day. We're around a little more than 2 months away here, so it's gonna ramp up the coverage of the Hockey Writers, coverage Prospect Corner here, and all the other shows on the YouTube channel. There's going to be draft coverage because a lot of those teams didn't make the playoffs. And going to be draft crazy. So we'll be talking a lot about that. So just before we let you go, just to make sure, check out the THW Sports Betting Guide. It's a brand new source for your daily sports odds, lines, props, and futures, daily fantasy strategy and analysis as well. Make sure you're following THW Bets on Twitter, get the latest on everything sports betting. Of course, if you decide to bet, please bet responsibly. If you or anyone you know has a problem with the gambling, please check out the resources below. And so thanks for joining us for another Prospect Corner. We will see you next time.